So in the last class, we talked about distribution, so I won't go back into all the things that I've covered already, but just want to say that distribution, we covered the concept of what is retailing, what is wholesaling, and that these two intermediaries are very important. And essentially, these intermediaries are proper business industry professions that are needed and that manufacturers need to work with most of the time, not all the time, because now you also have the opportunity to sell yourself directly to the consumers. It's not just now because of the internet, it has existed before, because before you could have your own retail space when you are a manufacturer, or your own wholesaling when you are a manufacturer, or you could sell through a catalog directly to your customers by building relationship. Marketing is about relationship, and you need to get this relationship with the various people. So you have a B2C, you're making product for the consumers, but you have to have a B2B, which is that you have to deal with retailers and wholesalers, all of these intermediaries. So this is exactly where we were last time that we talked together, um, is you have different organization between the wholesaler also being the manufacturer, or the manufacturer becoming the wholesaler. And then you have a last group, which is called the broker, the agent. They don't take title of the goods, and they perform some functions. Brokers are very important. How are brokers important, do you think? What are the strengths of brokers? If you wanted to be a broker, what would be your strengths? What would you work on in order to be strong at?
I can try to try to answer this. Well, a broker is usually an expert in the field, and they'll employ other salesmen, and they'll teach the salesmen what they need to learn and what they need to know, so they can go out and sell the products.
Okay, so this is correct. So there are people that the way you start being a broker is first, I think it's fair to say that you pretend that you are being an expert, and in the process of pretending that you're an expert, after a number of years, by default you become an expert, and then you don't have to pretend anymore. You become one if you're good, and then you serve a real purpose, because there's always need for an expert, and you will be teaching other people, which will be working with you or for you, to become themselves broker for your own brokerage company. And so what is the purpose that they serve? Why are they necessary? What do they do that manufacturers can't do or distributors can't do? Why is there a third group, the
Make
brokers?
relationships between the two.
Exactly. So their strength is they have relationships. And not only they have relationships, but they have a reputation. They have a reputation of knowing who does what, who needs what. So they are an intermediary, which is different than the retailer or the wholesaler, because the retailer and wholesaler, like it says in the green bubble, um, the retailer and wholesaler takes possession of the goods that are being exchanged. They warehouse them, versus the brokers don't warehouse them. So the broker is just someone who's going to facilitate connections between intermediaries. So a broker is someone that's going to be very active in the community. It's someone that likes to be sociable by knowing and going and meeting and joining and collaborating and offering themselves to, even for free, just to help. They like to mingle. They're sort of a nosy, but for a good reason, because eventually they come to be useful. So I give you an example. Um, Last two classes, I was talking about Shark Tank, um, the sharks in the Shark Tank program. And I was saying that these people, they speed up the process for people who are creative and creators and innovate with a new product, because they can quickly make this product being sold and commercialize the product very quickly, because they know who to call. They just call Bed, Bath and Beyond, but they don't call the purchasing agent. They just call the person that needs to be the person to be called. So let me show you something. Share the screen. Sorry, I forgot to share the screen, but I'm going to do this right now. In this screen, you will see a typical email or message that I would get as a manufacturer. So this is a distribution company that has 20 stores. And they say, you want to submit your product for review? Fine. You want our buyer to buy your product? Fine. But before, you need to meet some requirement. Does your product meet our buying principles? Vara Group, which is a name that I made up, aims to be America's most responsible drinks distributor. To deliver on our community commitments, we have strict guidelines in place on ranging products on how they are advertised and promoted. For example, we won't stock products or advertise in a way that might appeal to children or encourage excessive consumption. So that's good that they do that. Getting your product range with us, what do you need to do? Like most retailers, Vara Group maintains a comprehensive, up-to-date range review calendar. So it's like suddenly it's like, whoa, if I want to sell one of my products to this group of stores, I have to go inside their calendar and see when do they review. So I produce cognac, so then I have to go to the calendar and see when do they review cognac. Let's say I go today and the review of cognac was in March. So I missed the March review. Now I have to contact them and ask them, in 2022, when do you review cognac? And then in 2022, they say, oh, we will review cognac in August 2022. So then when they review in August in 2022, maybe they make an order in April 2023. So imagine you lose 2 or 3 years like this with this kind of stuff. But if you have a broker, you know how much time you lose? Maybe a minute, depending on who it is. The broker grabs the phone, call the buyer of the Vara Group and say, hey, Bill, I have a very good cognac right now that I think you should be really looking at. And then Johnny on the other side says, oh, what's the name? Get me some samples. Then you get them samples 5 days after. Then 3 days after, you may have a purchase order. 3 days. So 3 days plus 2 days plus 3 days, it's like 10 days. 10 days after you have a purchase order. Versus if I go through the normal process like this, it could take 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And so, I hope I live a long time, but someone takes 10 years away from my life, that's a lot of years that I could have done business. And if you end up doing business and all the time, you have to go through these loops, is you're not going to get very much done. So to get things done, you get a broker. And the broker is the person that is sort of vouched, is sort of approved by a lot of these buyers within an industry. And those buyers, they know that if Bill comes and say, I want you to look at that, Bill is not trying to push something to you. He's trying to find the right products. It's like a filter. It's like a person that does a pre-filtering of all of these products, then only like what they like or what they know someone that's going to like it, they grab. And it doesn't work all the time. So they have to grab 20 for 5 to work, for 3 to work, but it's 20 to 3. Through this process is 1,000 to 1. So through the year, we'll review our range in some details. The calendar will give you guidance on when, for example, we may be reviewing our craft beer range, sparkling wine, or the dark spirit category. This is the best time for you to submit your product for consideration. Relevant factors we look at include sales performance, net margins, market trends, and expected performance against competitor products. So then you have to prepare a presentation that talks about sales performance, net margins. Remember on Monday, we were talking about net margins, market trends, and expected performance. Is you have to prepare that. So usually these are the ones that everybody asks. So you're not wasting any time to make one specifically for that client, potential client. Is you make one for that client, and every client is sort of 90, 80% the same. So you just readapt. It's a redo of, so you're constantly redoing your presentation for different purpose and different potential clients. You see, therefore, what a broker is and how important are their role. If you were to ask me, Professor, I'm in business, I want to make some good money, but I don't have a lot of money right now. What should I do? Become a broker. Why, Professor? So 99% of the students will answer, why do you want me to be a broker? I don't know what it is. Because you just told me you don't have a lot of money. To be a broker, in most cases, you don't need a lot of money. And they are the people that make the most money for the most cases. The richest people on earth tends to be brokers. I mean, they are diamond brokers or oil brokers. The person that picks up the oil or picks up the diamond is really the richest one. The one that is rich is the one that trades them and doesn't even buy them. They just trade on the commission from one hand to another. These get very rich because they have very low investment and very high return compare. But therefore, you make it sound very easy, Professor. If it was so easy, why don't everybody know it? Do it. Well, first, because they don't know. Most people don't know about brokers. Like I said, 99.9%. They don't know what's the job. And two, because there's a lot of sales involved. And it's also it's very entrepreneurial to be a broker because only good brokers succeed. And so there's a lot of personal investment that you have to spend at the very beginning of your career as a broker. It's like a dentist. Is you open your dental office, the first 2, 3, 5 years, you may not be very rich because you don't have a lot of people that come. But as you're starting to really help people with their teeth, people start talking and you start having a reputation. And then next thing you know, you have to hire an additional dentist to help you take care of your dental office. So good brokers are the same. As soon as they're successful, because they have usually good ethics, they are not short term, they are long term. They really care for the satisfaction of their clients. What's nice with the broker is you don't have thousands of clients because you couldn't take care of all of them. It's very custom work to few clients that you do very well for. So brokers, therefore, are part of the distribution network because they speed up the process of connecting distributors, meaning retailer and wholesalers, with the people that manufacture. All right, so I keep on going. Trends in wholesaling is that there's a reduction of wholesalers. That's pretty obvious, is because of the new technology is sort of allowing everyone to have access more directly to manufacturers. So before you had to get a wholesaler because it was not easy to deal with the manufacturer because the manufacturer will sell large quantities. So you had to go to someone that was breaking these large quantities in smaller quantities. So you have to work with wholesalers. Now, because of technology and direct sales through the manufacturing company has adapted their services to also sell directly to the consumers. Not all the time, but more and more so. So therefore, the need for wholesaler is declining. So the distinction between a wholesaler and a large retailer is becoming smaller because a retailer, in order to stay competitive, they've done many things, including starting to wholesale themselves. That way they can buy it at a better price, even for themselves. Therefore, wholesalers, to survive, what they have to do is continue to increase the amount of services. And so the most common service is to offer the reduction of the quantity of product that they would sell. Normally, they would sell very large quantity of products. Let's say you want to buy material and you want to buy material from a wholesaler because the price is a third of the price. When you go to a wholesaler, they will sell it to you for 10% of the price even. But they will do that because they're going to sell you 3 miles of material. But people don't, um, consumers don't buy 3 miles of material. They buy 20 yards, 50 yards. So therefore they go to a retailer. But then wholesaler, what they've done, if they've created some services where people are able to buy from them as well and don't have to go to a retailer. And instead of buying it 10 times cheaper than they would from a retailer, it's half the price. So it's worth for consumers to get organized and maybe to buy at the same time with a friend in order to buy a larger quantity, but they will be buying it at half the price. So wholesalers also are going global, which means that to succeed, you can't just think of your domestic market. Is you want to start expanding. And so obviously the European Union is doing very well with this because there's the natural expansion within the different states, but also America, where you're looking at Canada, you're looking at Mexico, and then you can start doing the same work. So this concludes the P of place. As you remember, P for place is distribution. Now we're starting the last P for promotion, which is essentially communication. So what is integrated communication? So first, what are the P of promotion is you have um, 6 different activities inside promotion. You have PR, direct marketing, personal selling, sales promotion, advertising, and social media is the number 6 stage there. So what's the idea behind integrated marketing communication? The idea behind this is as you communicate, you realize that you have multiple targets. You realize that you have multiple channels of communication. And so what becomes difficult is to be consistent, is to have a single messages that is shared across the different targets. So that's why it's called integrated marketing communication, which means that you cannot have different messages because you're sending it to different channels. So it's like, what's what is your slogan for your company, for your brand, should be the slogan should be in social media, but should be also in advertising, should be in direct marketing, it should be everywhere. Oftentimes what happens is because these are different channels, they sort of communicate about the company in a different way when in fact it should be the same message across the different channel. And so therefore you should constantly integrate and look at the value of these different channels together. How much do they add versus random selecting the channels that you want to employ. Most businesses, that's what they do is they go, oh, I'm going to do some sponsoring and see what happens. And then they stop and they say, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, I'm going to do some advertising, and then they stop. It's a little bit like someone that would take natural medicine. They would take natural products like vitamins or whatever, and then they would take vitamins for a month. And then after a month, they would go, I don't feel very different. So then they stop. And then they will take fish oil for a month. And then they would stop and say, it didn't do nothing. The thing is, these is you have to see the complementarity of the things that you take at the same time. Are they complementary or are they sort of overlapping and doing the same thing? And you can't expect any return on these most methods of communication within a month. Most methods of communication, not all, but most methods of communication, they work on the long term. So it's the repetition, but it's not the repetition of once a day for a month. It's the repetition of once a day for 6 months. So once you go into advertising or you go into social media, is you can't just do it once. You can't have one post and expect something is going to happen. It's the repetition, the constant nurturing of your social media that makes you successful. So when you communicate, what are the objectives? 1 is to inform, 2 is to persuade, 3 is to compare, and 4 is to remind. So informing is not selling. Informing is just letting them know what your product does, what your service is about. Persuading is to give them an incentive. So you give them a reduction. Today, 50% off. That's persuasive advertising. Comparing is telling them, here's what we do, here's what the competitors do. And reminding is because people eventually, even though they've been informed, persuaded, and they've been buying the product, they have to be reminded. Otherwise, they forget. And so the reminding is essentially just, again, another inform, persuade, compare. Communication is all about the communicator sending a message and the consumer receiving the message. What's important is what is the source? The source is who's sending the message. Is it a man, a woman? Is it someone famous? Is it someone not famous? Is it someone who's considered an expert? Is it a stereotype person? And then you have to encode the message. Encode the message is using the terms that are particular to the group of people that you're going to send the message. What are the keywords? What are the number one reason why they benefit, number one benefit why they buy this product? So you have to encode that number one benefit in the message, choosing the right channel. Not all channels are good. The radio may be very, very, very good, but not for everything. Social media may be very, very good, but not for everything. So there's different purpose for each one of those channels. Then the consumer decodes the message. Decoding is what they understood, exactly what you sent them. So decoding equals encoding equals good communication. But good communication is not just them understanding the message. That's good. The next step above that is remembering, memory based, the message. And then the third step is doing something, acting on it. So if people act on it, it may be because of memory, or it may be because they saw it and they acted on it right away. So you want to try to have those three levels, which is that it gets their attention, they understand what it is, they memorize it, and then they do something about that. And then you can build on top of that. So you don't get that from one posting, you get that from multiple postings, because it's like an overlap. Every message is like a thin layer, and you have to build all of these thin layers in order to have something much more of a foundation. So would you communicate is the first thing that you're looking at. And what are you trying to do? Are you trying them to buy? Are you trying them to learn about the product? Are you trying them to think and to remember something about the product? So that's what you work at the very beginning. Then you design the message. So the message content, the message structure, and the message form. Essentially, you're trying to get them their attention, their interest, then they are motivated, and then they go into purchasing. So what are the message content, such as the appeal? So you have the rational appeal. The rational appeal is, it tells you the benefit of the product. So it's very much on the functionality of the product. The emotional appeal is how it's going to make them feel. They're both very important, and it depends what you're selling. We see, if you're selling a remedy for headache or a vaccine, you're not going to sell a vaccine on. I mean, you could sell the vaccine on an emotion, but most of what you want to do is you would want to sell it on the fact that it works. So it's based on some scientific research. Other ways to get people to be emotional is humor, fear, sex. So humor is good because it gets attention, but the problem is it's not universal. Fear is very good because it gets people extremely motivated, but eventually it can damage your brand and your reputation. Sex is probably the best for attention, but it's not good for rational appeal, or for the most part, and it's not very good for the memorization of the message. When there is a sex appeal in communication, is what it does is people really look at the sexual situation. They don't try to really memorize the brand, or try to use the information for future purchases. So sex is an easy way for attention, but the wrong way for the quality of the image of the brand in the long term. So it's like really a band-aid, and not a deep methods for building the content of an image that's going to have a long-term value. Moral appeal is also important. Moral appeal is going to be connected to the rational appeal, so it's going to use some cause and effect. And so doing the right things is definitely a motivation that works for most people. Structure and format is the concept of, when do you have conclusions? Where do you draw conclusions? So you draw conclusion at the beginning, it's very good, but because then you get people interested. They hear the main argument at the beginning of a message, so get they get to hear what's the most important. However, they may not listen to the full message. If you build up the argument to a result, a conclusion, this is the most rational, but the problem is means that you have to keep people's attention from the beginning to the end. And so the, so imagine it's an ad on YouTube. If people, a large percentage of people are going to click on the button skip on YouTube. When do you want to have the best argument? The first 5 seconds or the last 5 seconds? It's more logical if it's the last 5 seconds. But since there's a significant percentage of people that click on the button skip, you need to maybe have it in the front. So both arguments are good. It's further research based on your message, the target, and when will it be better to have this argument at the beginning or at the end. You have to think also of the design and the illustration of your message in order to catch people's attention. So I see there's a question. Yes, Carlo.
Yeah, I just had a comment. I noticed that when there's a YouTube video and they come to not to a conclusion, but to uh, an apex of what they're trying to present, just like a commercial,
Yes.
they'll cut it off right before, and then you'll go to the commercial. You have to wait 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then you find out what the conclusion is. So I think that's maybe what you're referring to.
Yes, exactly. Yes, so they do this because, oh, you mean the conclusion of the video?
Exactly.
Oh yeah, so that's a little different from what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the ad itself, the commercial itself. You see, you go on a YouTube video or you watch TV and you're gonna have commercials. The commercial is gonna be, let's say, 25 seconds. Some people are gonna look at the 25 seconds, and some people are gonna change the channel or click on the button skip. The button skip comes in 5 seconds, let's say. So if this commercial is 25 seconds and you click after 5, you're missing 20 seconds. And so the point is, therefore, should you have the main argument within the first 5 seconds? Or should you have the main argument in the last 5 seconds of the commercial? The main argument in the last 5 seconds is more rational because normally when you present something is you present what it is, and then at the end you say this is why this is good and you should be buying it or you should be interested. It comes at the end. But since you know there's 50%, 70% of the people that click on the button skip and are only forced or able to see the first 5 seconds, then you just say, do I take the risk that 75, 80% not going to see the message and therefore it's not going to have any impact, and have the argument at the end, or do I want 95% of the people to really see those first 5 seconds, and therefore I will put the main argument at the very beginning. If it's at the very beginning, lots of people are going to hear it, see it, but they're not going to totally understand what it means, but at least they're going to see it. It's almost like saying good publicity is good, bad publicity is good too, because bad publicity is better than no publicity. So even you could say an argument that is on the first 5 seconds is not going to make a as good ad as if it was the last 5 seconds of a 25-second message because of comprehension. However, since it's at the beginning, most people are going to see the beginning and nothing in the rest. So you take a chance to lose either way. You're going to lose both way, either way. The full message with the best at the end, or the best at the beginning. And then if they were to see the full message, it's not going to be as easy to understand because you only have 25 seconds. So if you sort of jig rig it, you have to sort of create a message that you have to draw to conclusion in order for people to really understand things. And if the conclusion is at the beginning, it's harder to draw to conclusion. Do you understand, Carlo?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
I think Jack Graham has a question too.
Yes, I mean it was more of just a statement or
Yes.
trying to add on to it. Since you were talking about the example you guys were talking about were YouTube video ads, right?
Yes.
Sonny and I recently found out, and I guess is becoming more and more popular because it's becoming more known, is that when those ads pop up, most of the time there's at like the bottom left part of the screen of the ad, there's an eye with a circle around it, and if you click on it, you can skip the whole ad altogether. And it's like, because it's like, do you find this ad repetitive or inappropriate, or it's like, for moral reasons, and because of that you'll never see that ad again. And was really curious, like I wonder what effect this has on that advertising market and how that affects like what they're trying to promote and sell. Because I mean, now people can just completely turn off your ad and say they don't want to ever see it again.
So does it turn off that particular ad, or it just turns off the entire advertising?
It turns off. I mean, you'll get other ads when
Yeah.
you like click on other videos, but that particular ad you probably won't see for a while,
Oh
and it
yes, yes.
completely cut it off. Like it can only go for like 1 second. Like one thing hasn't been said about it. So I wonder what the effect that will have on, and if that will have to shift like marketing demographics or something.
Well, what happens, you see, it's always an issue with consumer rights. And so what happens is when they created those ads on YouTube, there was no consumer rights. It was essentially free for all. And then this became more of a proper channel of communication
Mm.
with proper agencies. So then people that defend consumer rights build up this inside in order to protect people rights. And as they protect the rights, you're right, there's people that know about their rights and know that they are being protected. They know where to click. And then they click on this, and that way they get their protection. But then more and more people know about this, and then eventually they click on it, not so much because they're trying to protect their rights, but because they're trying to save time. And then what happens is it's now the turn of the advertisers and now the turn of the brands or the communication channels to find just another way of getting attention of people without thinking too much of their rights. And so it's a constant circle is businesses innovate, then they have to be regulated. Then they get so regulated that they find just another innovation in order to stay away from regulation. And then a regulation gets regulated. It's a constant adaptation cycle like this that we live in, and and so you see that uh, I mean with musicians now doing their own cryptocurrency. Musicians don't make money, so they make NFTs, cryptocurrency, and then that's not regulated very much right now. And so then they are going to make some people are going to be getting very rich from this, and then the government's going to come and then regulate it. Then it's going to be very hard to make money on FTS, and then the musicians are going to go, what do we need to do next? And then they're going to go after something else. So it's a life is a constant cycle, whereas like a cat and a mouse, and they keep running and trying to catch each other. And so I think that that's what this is. This is finally the consumer rights getting back some power, but then the consumer getting back, you know, it's a little bit like emails. I mean, in the late 90s, email marketing was very successful. It was underused, extremely successful. And so why was it underused? Because people did not get much email, and then they got lots of email, but most of it was junk. But they were still reading it because they are not used to get a lot of email, so they would read a lot of junk mail. And then the email companies created a junk mail filter, and then we got protected because of the junk mail filter. But then with even with the junk mail filter, there's still some mail that gets through. So then we are very careful in reading our mail, and then now we skip a lot. So then the opening of email, the rate is not good at all. And it's much better to do text or WhatsApp or WeChat marketing than do email now. But now, perfect, let's do WhatsApp, let's do text, let's do all this. And then in two years, it's going to be saturated again. And there's going to be a new way of communication, which is not so regulated. And so it keeps going like this. And it's just interesting to see them. And it's very important to be at the always as a marketing person. I am always, I was using email, started using email 93. From 92 to 95, I used to tell people what it was email. Most people, they have no idea. I used to use Zoom 7 years ago. And until the pandemic, I had a hard time using Zoom. Uh, People didn't know what it was. And so communication is this way, is it takes the channel to become democratic, and as it becomes democratic, it gets regulated. Did I answer your question or commented on it?
Yeah, it's thank you for giving me insight on that. It's really interesting.
And so now, because you told us that, we're going to all look for that eye in the circle, and then we're all going to click on it. And eventually, because of that, in 2 years, you know, those ads are not going to be as good anymore, right? And so therefore, communication companies are going to have to think about something else. So it's very much like a gold digger, gold miner mentality. The concept of communication or the concept of business altogether is constantly trying to get attention, trying to get people memory.
I liked the term you used earlier. It's a cat and mouse. I think that that fits that description pretty well.
Yes, it's cat and mouse. I mean, Red Bull. I mean, the Red Bull, there's some research done by consumers that were upset. That was like something like 6 years ago. They were upset because they say Red Bull doesn't do anything and it's falsely advertised. Um, and they were using slogans that were also pushing a little bit the limit of what the product may do. And so those consumers, probably under the umbrella of some lawyers that wanted to make some money, went after Red Bull, and they actually won. And Red Bull had to disclose the fact that the product doesn't do that much, and at least it doesn't do as much as they're pretending it does. And so they didn't go into a full lawsuit. They went for a settlement, and the settlement was that they were giving away bottles of Red Bull for free to consumers, random consumers. There was like a 1-800 number that you could call, and you would say, I want 30 bottles of Red Bull for free. Here's my address. And they would ship it to you. But obviously, Red Bull was not very efficient in advertising the fact that they actually lost a lawsuit that about the fact that their product doesn't do that much, as much as it pretends to be, and they in the process didn't advertise very much that free phone for getting free products. And there was a period of like 5-6 months where you could call, and so they didn't get that many calls. And that was part of the financial retribution that they had to give back to the community for having sort of been overselling something. And they were not very zealous and very good at. I mean, most people didn't hear about it, and not so therefore they didn't give that many bottles for free, and therefore this suit didn't cost them very much, because after that the condition of the agreement was that they could not be sued on this element of the fact that the product doesn't do that much. So uh, companies should be very good at making their product satisfying, and making their product satisfying always is in the eyes of the target. A satisfying product is not in the eyes of a scientific, is not in the eyes of a specialist, is not in the eyes of a professional, is not in the eyes of an expert. The expert is always the consumers. If the consumer is satisfied, means that you've done very well. Does the product has to do what it's supposed to do? As long as it does it in the eyes of the consumer, that's what is important. But there's always the element of ethics and morality that you have to take into consideration, because you also want to think about the longevity of your company and the legacy of your company. And there is a big dilemma is, you'll be making probably more money, not thinking so much about your legacy, because the legacy is going to be making money for the company in the long run, which may be much longer than the person's run who's running it. So there is lots of conflict of interest. And when you develop products and you think about communication and you think about the target, there are many conflicts of interest. So when you think about an eye-catching product, is you want to do something which has a contrast. So obviously this is not a bull, but it does look like a bull, so it helps you memorize. You sell a luxury, you sell a jewelry, perfume. It's very common to have a situation where you have just a product in some kind of very whitewash type of situation, because you want this sense of purity or something like this. You want to get a distinctive format, but at the same time, you want people to understand what the product is about. Here's an example of hemorrhoidal ad where you essentially see someone's rear with some flames. This is another ad that is very old. It's for a Beetle, and it says it makes your house look bigger. So obviously the Beetle in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s was a very small car coming from Europe compared to the big car that you had in the USA. So you have to imagine back then, it made no sense to buy a Beetle when everybody had a car that was twice the size. So they had to find some kind of counter argument in order to explain why you would want a car that is twice smaller when you could get a much bigger car, because it doesn't have to be bigger. Bigger might not be better. And so they had to work on this and find all kinds of messages in order to change people's opinion. Here's another ad for a car. So this time it's also a car from Europe. It's a car from France. And what they're trying to tell you here is that it's a car that, or at least that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to tell you that this is a car that belongs to two environments. Oftentimes when you advertise something is you have to explain that it comes from one environment, and you've really very much anchor this brand and this product in its environment, so it's clear for people. I'm in this environment, then they memorize it. Oh, I will need this car or this brand. And here what they're trying to do is it's very versatile. So obviously this is more complicated because it goes into the concept of positioning. And as I said earlier, positioning is a very complex matter in marketing, maybe the most complex matter. And the more attributes you have, the more it's complicated. So here, this one could imagine that this car had a complex positioning. They could be multiple things at the same time. So to express this duality, the multiple thing at the same time, is they essentially put two ads. But what's smart is they actually put the car just on one side and then the silhouette on the other side. So your brain actually does the effort of moving the object from one side to the other, which is forcing you to memorize and process, forcing you to process. And the process is the start of memorization. The problem is when you process is you have short-term process and long-term process. Here, the process that you're doing is most likely to be short-term. So therefore, it doesn't help with the memory that you really want, which is long-term. This company, Renault, is in the top 5 largest producer of car. They must have spent a lot of money on this. Obviously, this was not so smart because there's a short-term memory process and you want a long-term memory process. So this ad is only partially covering, I suppose, the purpose of what the ad was trying to do. When you develop communication and you want to be effective, you have to choose the right media, and the media that you choose is very much connected to the target that you have. So if you say, I'm going to choose the Wall Street Journal, it's not the same as if you say, I'm going to choose Gun and Ammo. Gun and Ammo or Wall Street Journal are two different journals, but not so much the journals are different. What's different is the people that read them. So without going to all the elements or characteristics of the difference between the two groups, one is the income. So Gun and Ammo is less than 50,000. Wall Street Journal is more than 100,000, or maybe more than 150,000. And so if your target makes 35,000, you would be wasting your money communicating in Wall Street Journal because they're not reading that channel. So it's very important to understand that. Then the other importance is the difference between a personal channel of communication and a non-personal. So to go very fast with this is which one is more persuasive, a one-on-one or a piece of paper? The more persuasive one is the one-on-one, is one person speaking to another person. So the most effective way of communicating is not, it depends what you mean by most effective. So the most effective per contact. Per contact, for each contact, the most effective is sales, personal selling, a person trying to sell to another person. That's the most effective because you can adapt on the moment to the person, really answer their questions, more effective than Facebook ad. But non-personal can be very effective because you can really do some research and then send it in a way that is quite customized to the different people. And so there's pros and cons between personal and non-personal. And other issues related to that are credibility. Yes, Carlo, you have a question?
How are you defining whether it's effective or not? Are you meaning the amount of profit that a company can make from a personal or non-personal?
So effective, it will be, that's a good question. So there's several ways to measure effectiveness. Effectiveness is, one, measured by, do they remember the message? That's one way. Two, did they buy or not buy? Three, did they share the message with someone else? So these three are some positive results. Obviously, the best one is sales. If I had to rank them, and you can easily rank them, it's like a pyramid, is sales at the top, then it's share it with someone else, and remember the message. If they remember the message, maybe they share it with someone else, maybe they buy. If they share it with someone else, that means they memorized it, and maybe they buy. And if they buy, that's best than any of the other two, right? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
Professor, what was the first one again?
Okay, so the first one, the lower one, actually, I'll have to do a pyramid. That's a good way of explaining it. So the first one is memory. The second one is sharing information. And then the third one is buy. The top, buy, share with others, and remember it.
Thank you.
So it's like the other day I called my credit card company, American Express, to ask them a question. And as I was doing that, they looked at my account and they go, oh my God, you could qualify for a black card, whatever. I'm like, I want this thing. And then they were talking to me, blah, 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 blah. And essentially I didn't have the time. And I said, you know what? I'll have my wife call you. But what happens is I memorized the information. And so I haven't told my wife. I don't know if I'll tell her. I don't want her to bother with this. But I could be telling someone, oh, if you spend this much, you could have this kind of card that gives you this benefit. Then that would be the second layer. And then the third is I will actually tell my wife or myself, call them and say, yes, I want to get the higher membership, blah, blah, blah. So that's, and so you imagine I got an email telling me that. Okay. Imagine I got a text telling me that. Imagine I got someone calling and telling me that. Imagine I have someone knocking at the door and telling me that. There's a different hierarchy of the impact that this different communication to me have on me. A face-to-face person is said to be the highest one. And a banner ad on YouTube is probably the lowest one, right? So that's the spectrum of communication. So it's important to see that they have different impacts. Now, connected to this, Carlo, do you still have a question?
No, I'm sorry. That's
no problem.
From the previous one.
No worries. So then the issue with credibility is very important because you have to think about the credibility of the different channels. You know, so oftentimes you hear CNN, the most trusted source for the news or something like that. True or not true, it doesn't matter. That's what they say. And so by saying it long enough, people start believing it. So the problem is channels have different credibility, but people have different credibility. So if someone talks about medicine, they say they are a doctor, they get more credibility than if they say they are a nurse, or if they say that they are a secretary in an hospital, or if they say that they're just a bystander. So that's all the concept of credibility. Word of mouth is the best one. So it's like someone telling someone else. Non-profit organizations have higher credibility than profit organizations. Then spokespersons have credibility, but again, it depends on who they are. So it's like a famous celebrity who is known. So it's like a famous celebrity who is a singer or part of a band, a famous band. You know, I don't know, U2, the singer Bono tells you that you should be buying that guitar. Bono tells you to buy that guitar. You go, you know, it's Bono. He says that's the best guitar. Then you believe it. But Bono tells you to buy a perfume. That's not as good. Bono tells you to buy tires. What does Bono know about tires? So the credibility goes down. So you have to think about this. Celebrities have a higher because they have popularity more than credibility. And then they can have credibility in addition because they talk about something that they are known for. So the last point is your own experience with the organization. So if you've seen the organization being very involved in innovation and I was just using tires, constantly innovation, or we were talking about racing, and you see them involved in racings and winning in races, then you would think that this brand of tires know what they're doing because many of their tires win in racing, and therefore my experience is that this will be a good brand of tires. Same thing, and I'll go very fast on this, is sponsoring versus advertising. And so that's why when I was a student, I didn't know. Why would I sponsor versus why would I advertise? Because of the credibility. When you sponsor, you're more credible. It's an event, so people see it, but there's less people usually that see an advertising. For-profit organizations are not as credible as non-profit. And obviously, if you're a non-profit using sponsoring, then you get the best out of everything, versus if you're a profit organization using advertising. So how do you evaluate your campaign? By the communication effect and by the sales effect. So communication effect is, do people remember it? That's my pyramid. Do people remember it? One. And two, do they tell other people about, about it? That's a communication effect. And then sales effect. Did your sales increase? Sales effects are very difficult to prove, if even possible. It's easier to measure communication effect than it is to measure sales effect. And the reason is that for sales effect, there's a lot of confounding effect, which means there's a lot of overlapping effect that makes it very difficult to 100% or significantly associate it with that your sales went up because of the amount of advertising. However, you can sometimes connect it very closely because there's a direct process, like a click. So you click here, you click here, you click here, and you click here. So then, because of the cookies, they can actually follow where you got the information. Or sometimes you say how you heard about the company and all that. And that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to measure the sales based on the communication. And why would they do that? Because they want to keep doing the communication that generate the more sales. And they're trying to make that connection. So how do you define your budget in communication? Is you use the affordable, what you can buy, the percentage of sales. You want to increase your sales by 10%, you got to increase your communication by 10%. The objective on tasks is what are the objectives and therefore what communication we need to do in order to get these objectives. So we have 12 objectives. For each objective, there is a set of communication, and at the end, you generate the budget of your communication. Obviously, by doing the objective on task, it's like a kid writing a Christmas letter to Santa Claus. And then eventually the parents say, okay, but we have $500, and then they have to cross off a lot of things. So the objective on task is creating it. Competitive parity is you just try to see where are your competitors being communicated. So sales promotion and public relation advertising, I'm just going to talk about these very quickly here. Sales promotion is the fact that you have a short-term incentive to encourage purchase of a product. So you give people samples, coupons, cash refund, price racks, premiums. You have sweepstakes, contests, games, and all of this. These are going to be short-term incentives that are going to get people attention, and they're going to see an immediate reduction, and you're going to increase your sales. The methods that are used is to the trade is to give extra products. So to B2B, B2B, you selling products to the wholesaler, and the wholesalers, you're giving them a promotion by saying, buy one container and we'll give you one pallet for free. You give them money in order to participate in the expenses that are going to be incurred for the wholesaler to sell. So discounts for buying more, allowances to participate in their expenses. You can also pay for them to go to convention and trade shows, or helping them do sales contests for their salespeople. So your intermediaries have salespeople, and you want their salespeople to sell more. Is you're going to give an incentive for them to be more motivated to sell, the salespeople of your distributor. So when you do sales promotion, what's very tricky is how long you're going to make it last. When is it going to start? When is it going to end? Is everyone going to be able to participate? And be very careful and making sure it's not too long, because the sales promotion that is too long gives the assumptions that the brand is hurting or it's hard to sell. So it's not very good. And then you eventually see if this was successful. What is public relation? Public relation is trying to have a group of people that are more like journalists. They build goodwill in the community, and they take care of bad problems when they happen, like rumors or accidents and things like that. Is you will be the one creating press release, brochures about the company, speaking to the government, speaking to the media. You will be creating packets for investors, and you will be talking about taking care of your the website, taking care of the social media. So that's why I've seen in the past 10 years a lot of students get into marketing, because marketing is the 4 P's. So it's one chunk. Inside the 4 P's, you have public relation, and public relation are the people that eventually created the social media as we know it today. So social media has exploded, and therefore the work for people to be in public relation and marketing has also exploded. Their roles are creating speeches, materials, and what I mean, written materials, verbal materials, videos, and all of this. There again, the public relation decision is try to identify who are your target, and set some objective for these targets, and then develop a plan, and then evaluate the quality of your plan. Advertising is a paid form of presentation, which is non-personal. So it's not promotion, it's advertising, it's communicating a brand, and it's clearly being paid, and therefore it's not non-biased. The idea with communication is a concept of reach, the percentage of people that will hear, the frequency, the number of times that they will hear it, and the media impact, which means the quality of the channel and the message in really changing people's mind. So there's 7 major advertising media: television, radio, magazine, newspaper, internet, billboards, and social media. And these are all the channels that you could choose in order to advertise. Now, very quick, what's a plan for marketing? A marketing plan. What's a plan for advertising? An advertising plan. Well, an advertising plan is the common man name for an advertising plan. Advertiser call this a copy strategy. So we call it a marketing plan. Advertiser call it a copy strategy. So I just wanted you to hear this so you know such a thing. There's no such a thing as an advertising plan, or unless you're not a trained advertiser. Trained advertiser call this copy strategy. So I put this slide here, but I don't want to go into details because that's what you would learn if you were taking an advertising class. But these are the key characteristics of a advertising plan called a copy strategy. So that's all I want you to remember. So now, what are the 3 key directions for when you advertise? The message is focused on the performance. The message is focused on the product, and the message is focused on the universe. So what does that mean? It means that when you communicate, you really want to talk about the product and how it looks. So it's very aesthetic. or the message is most focusing on what it does, the functionality, the benefits, or the message is focused on who's using it and where it's used. So these are the three main themes when you communicate. So let's do an exercise, and sometimes it's combined, it's not just one, there's usually one more. Here, is it focused on the performance? No, you can't see the performance. Is it focused on the universe? No, we can't see who's driving it and where you're driving it. It's focused on the product. Here, this bottle of Coke, it says the party starts here. Is it focused on the product? Well, you can see the product. Is it focused on the performance? Well, I guess it's hot. It's kind of like makes you happy, but it's focused on the universe. The universe meaning it's the end of the day. It's a party. It's the summer. It's hot. So it's the universe. Here is an ad for a car and it says, etc., etc. So it tells you about the reliability of that brand. Does it show you the product? You can't really see the product. You can see barely a part of the dial. Can you see the universe? No, you don't see where it's used. It's focusing on the performance. So it's always universe, performance, and the product. Here it tells you that this crab can is very fresh. What is it focusing on? The performance. Yes, it is the performance. It's the fact that it's fresh. You can't see the product. We can't see inside. We cannot see the universe, who's using it and where it is used. So therefore, it is this. To finish, so do I have any question left on integrated marketing communication? Well,
Thanks, Professor.
It was a pleasure this semester to work with you.
Well, it was a pleasure. Nice meeting you, and we learned a lot, honestly. I mean, I wish it was in person, but we still learned a lot.